for a really intimidating and cool design. Unfortunately, dealing with them is actually pretty simple though. They may seem scary at first, but hilariously helpless since it takes them a good minute to turn around. But still, it's fun to do so. Other than that, the only flaw I could think of is that they deal poison, but at least it makes sense due to them being snakes. Number 18, Mad Ones. Obviously, the most notable thing about these guys is how they work based on insight. If you come to Hemwick with less than 15 insight, then they just aren't even summoned, which is cool, and a slight nod to the importance of insight early on in the game. Overall, I think these guys have cool designs and a pretty fast and visceral, yet fair moveset.
Hier, diese Henker von Witch of Hemwick, die spawnen überhaupt nicht, wenn du unter 15 Insect hast.
I will say they do really suck in group
Poison.
fights. However, they usually don't appear near too many enemies, so it's not a huge deal. Number 17, Man-Eater Boars. As probably one of the most memorable enemy types in the series, I think a lot of us have a soft spot for the giant pigs. When it comes to combat, they're not particularly noteworthy. Most of their attacks are pretty basic, except for their charge, which does absolutely nutty damage. But they're a nice guarantee for getting some blood vials, and the late game ones are also part of the best soul farm in the main game. That is, if you're comfortable looking at them.
Wie in Nuketown. Ich kann für dich sogar mitwählen. Ist das cool, Digga.
I have no words. A lot of people think this animation was just an unfortunate circumstance from the nature of backstabs, but something tells me FromSoft knew what they were doing. Number 16, Hamlet Fishmen. The best thing about these guys is how fitting they are with their area. Like, imagine if you found yourself in this weird, creepy fishing village, but the main enemies inhabiting it were just regular Yarnamites. That would be such a mood killer. But luckily, these guys fit perfectly. I guess you could say the same for the research hall patients, but no. In terms of combat, they're definitely some of the better flowing fodder enemies, and the weapons they use such as harpoons feel perfectly fitting. They also have some long-ish wind-up attacks that are very satisfying to parry. Overall, these guys serve their purpose well with minimal flaws. Except, I absolutely hate this one guy who tries to bait you into getting stomped by the first shark enemy. Number 15 is the Nightmare Executioner with the cannon. Overall, I really like the Nightmare Executioners, and as an enemy by itself, this guy isn't bad at all. However, the reason why he can't be any higher is because of the terrible duo fight he creates with one of the Axe Executioners. Luckily, you can spawn behind him with a certain lamp, and just fight the cannon guy on his own first, which is nice, but because of the way it's set up, I'm sure a lot of people attempted to fight one, said screw this when the other one joined, and then never fought them again. Which is a shame, because on their own, they're actually really good enemies. And I'm just gonna blame the whole situation on this cannon guy. But aside from all the bullshittery, he's still a really fun enemy to fight solo. His attacks are kind of slow, but still aggressive with a nice and deliberate pace. If it weren't for the shaky enemy placements, this guy definitely would have been higher. Number 14, Brick Trolls. These guys are great at being one of the first enemies in the game that you actually have to take seriously. Up until the first encounter with one, pretty much all you fought until that point is regular Yarnamites. So I really appreciate them for creating some of the more tense moments in the game's opening hour. And for anyone who's playing Bloodborne as their first FromSoft game, they're a serious wake-up call in letting you know that not all enemies will be easily staggered, which should transition into realizing you should parry them. To this day, it's hard to recall a recent time that I fought one of these guys and didn't parry them, and that's probably because of how well they ingrained that aspect of the combat into me. See an enemy with lots of health and poise, then take a chance at deleting a huge chunk of their health. The only thing I don't really like about them is their design. I mean, it's not bad, but compared to other creatures in Bloodborne, they are pretty bland. Number 13, Wolf Yarnamites. These guys are kinda similar to the Brick Trolls, but I just find them more memorable. Personally, these enemies were the way that I figured out what the hell was going on with the Yarnamites on my first playthrough, since they're basically just a version of them that's more fully transformed into a beast. Plus, I just think they look cool, and a lot more intimidating than the Brick Trolls. And similar to them, these guys are another early part of the game that should engrave into you just how helpful parrying is. And once again, that's almost always how I deal with them. Number 12, Executioners. I really wish these guys were utilized better. There's only a handful of them in the entire game, and they're mostly just found in pretty uninteresting sections. But as enemies, I think they're quite good. Despite being pretty big boys, their attacks can come out surprisingly fast. And they hit pretty hard for the early game, so once again, these enemies are prime targets for gun parries. Though it is notably harder to do so here compared to the Brick Trolls and Wolf Yarnamites, since they can be surprisingly deceptive about when their attacks actually come out. Number 11, Snatchers. These guys are insanely memorable. I remember when I first encountered one, I was genuinely wondering if the game was bugged, because they seem to have way too much health and hit way too hard. But nope, these guys are just built different. And obviously the main reason why they hit so hard is because the devs wanted to ensure that you'll die to them at least once. Because if you do, then they drag you away and you get to discover Yahar Ghul early in the game. which was one of the most memorable moments of my first playthrough. And other than that whole aspect, I actually really like fighting them. I could see people arguing that they're poorly designed since, at the end of the day, their main standout feature is basically the fact that they're unbalanced and can kill you damn near instantly. But after playing this game countless times, I like having an enemy that genuinely keeps me on the edge of my seat and forces me to think twice before attacking. And of course, parrying works really well for them. Number 10, Beast-Possessed Soul. Similar to the fluorescent flower, there's only one of this enemy type in the entire main game. They're mostly found elsewhere in Chalice dungeons, which is a shame because if there were more of these guys, then they'd be a good bit higher. Their design is badass and fighting them is genuinely really fun. They have such a tense and fast-paced moveset combined with some awesome pyromancy attacks. And if they transform into their second mode, god, it just looks so cool. Fighting this thing really gets me in that mood where I feel like I'm in a badass brawl between Hunter and Beast. Like I said, the only thing holding it back is just the lack of them outside the Chalice dungeons, meaning they can't leave too much of an impact outside of the one fight. But aside from that, I pretty much like everything about these guys. Number 9, Church Doctors. While these guys aren't as cool on their own as one individual beast-possessed soul, they make up for it by being a lot more memorable. They're basically the main enemy of Cathedral Ward, which is basically the main area of the first half of the game. So it's nice that there's also a lot of variations of them. There's guys with canes, scythes, repeating pistols, flame sprayers, and giant frenzy poking sticks. However, the most notable thing about them is obviously their parry window. I said before that Brick Trolls and Wolf Yarnamites act kind of like a parrying tutorial, but these guys are a literal parry tutorial, because if you shoot at any moment in their attack animation, you get a guaranteed stun. And while it does somewhat trivialize them, I'm okay with it since they're usually found in groups, which makes things a bit more tense. And one more neat touch is how when you progress through the game to get more insight, the ones who carry lamps start being able to use new attacks with them, which is a cool feature and kind of throws you off the first time. Also, I really like their designs. They're basically just a bunch of Ghostface clones, but with way better drift. Number 8, Shark Giants. I can argue.
Du weißt ja, diese Doktoren bei Cathedral Ward, ne? Wenn du mehr Insect hast, haben die neue Attacken.
Sniper, get down.
Digga!
See the people in the comments talking about how shit these enemies are, but I've had it with all the shit people give these guys, because they're awesome. They do have flaws, and I'll cover that soon, but overall I think they're great. Sometimes you need to have these bigger and beefier enemies that you're meant to completely focus on, which is helped by the fact that they're really damn intimidating. And overall I'd say they're pretty well designed. Most of their attacks are slow and easy to predict, but they also come with some huge delays, which can be really deceptive. And when you can consistently parry them, it feels amazing, since there's almost no chance you're gonna break their stagger otherwise. In my opinion, they only have 2 flaws. One is obviously the well when there's 2 of them, because no. And the other would be their charge attacks. Most of the time when fighting these guys, I find it enjoyable and challenging, but once they use that charge, my patience just evaporates. The hitbox is just too damn long and humongous. But other than that, I really appreciate these guys for giving the game a good challenge outside of boss fights, and fitting well with their area. Number 7, Scourge Beasts. In my opinion, these might be the most solid enemies in the entire game. They're found throughout a lot of sections, and they even come with a disgusting redesign in Yahar Ghul, where they're made out of various body parts. The main reason I think they work well is because, despite them being fast, having a lot of health, and doing decent damage, it's pretty easy to stunlock them. This is also nice because it makes dealing with them in ganks less of a headache, and when it comes to their attacks, most of them are pretty well telegraphed, so they never really feel cheap to me. They're also used for multiple jump scares throughout the game, which is really unlike these games to do, making it stand out. So overall, I think they're kind of underappreciated. Also, since they can easily be staggered, it's really fun to spam the Whirligig L2 on them. Number 6, Shadows of Yharnam. I'm sure the Shadows have a fair share of haters, just due to the nature of them being reused from a boss fight. But honestly, I think these guys might even work better as enemies than their initial boss fight. I can't think of any enemy types that feel more specifically catered towards group fights than these guys. The way they're balanced with melee dudes, pyromancer dudes, and ones who are partially both, just works really well. Fighting the melee ones straight up is a lot of fun. They have some quick and visceral sword swipes that are insanely fun to parry, and the other 2 types are sort of pushovers on their own, but do a good job of keeping pressure on from range, and all the while not being too annoying. And I personally have fun baiting them to hit me so I can just parry them as well. Plus, I just think they look cool, and it's interesting how they work as guardians of Queen Yharnam since they're Thumerians. Also, like the giant pigs, they're part of the best soul farm in the main game, and I always love pitting them against the pigs to see who comes out on top. Number 5, Lorne Silverbeasts. When I started making a rough draft of this list, I had these guys somewhere around the middle, because I very rarely actually fought them, and mostly just had messy memories of dealing with them near the Mensis Brain's Frenzy, which would usually just result in me running past them. But upon closer inspection, these guys are kind of awesome. I can't recall any enemy from any of these games having so many different methods of attacking you. These guys wave torches, try to bite you, instantly grow super long claws, sling worms at you, shoot whatever this is, use the torch as a flamethrower, cause a lightning blast, or just say screw all that and get on all fours to charge at you. They're so insane and I love it. Plus they work really well as a nightmare enemy type. They just look like such illogical abominations, and they fit perfectly. So all in all, I surprisingly really like the Silver Beasts now. Number 4, Chapel Giants. Easily one of the coolest looking enemies in my opinion. Seeing these giant skelly boys slowly patrolling the streets makes the vibe at Cathedral Ward a lot more tense than if it was just the church doctors. And all in all, I think they're damn well designed. As you would expect, they have slow but hard-hitting attacks, and this is one of the few enemies where I'd maybe recommend not locking on, since sometimes it feels easier to roll through their attacks than dash by them. They also have a completely unique mechanic where if they do a slam attack, they can shoot a bone through their knee, and if you hit it enough, it will get them into a staggered state, and I don't think I can recall any other enemies from these games having a feature like that. There's also a few different variations of them, but honestly the axe ones are probably just the best. The barehanded ones are kinda easy, and the Fire Fist one is actually pretty cool, but the one with the ball and chain next to the Bloodstone shards, I don't know about that one. The placement is just so cool. Number 3, Snake Parasites. Now we have the best of the snake enemies, and not only are they easily the best of them in terms of combat, but they also do the best job at portraying the twist. I like how when you see the first one, you kinda just assume that it's another random Yarnamite enemy, but then this happens. Oh, well that's neat. And luckily they're actually pretty fun to fight. I like how they have a mixture of attacks with the snakes themselves, meanwhile the body still tries to hit you. And since the snake bites can be really quick and hard to predict, pairing them takes a lot of time to get used to. But when you do pull it off, it feels great. I think there's just the right amount of them placed throughout the Forbidden Woods, and I don't have any issues aside from the poison. But like I said with the big snake balls, at least it makes sense. Number 2, Nightmare Executioners. I know how controversial it will be to put these guys at number 2. There are so many different reasons for people to dislike them. There's the terrible cannon guy that I mentioned earlier, and the only other one is found in an annoyingly tight spot, which doesn't really work for fighting such a large enemy. Plus, that one perfectly blocks your path to get to the Lawrence boss fight. And even when considering all that, it's arguable that they aren't even good as single-target enemies, because they have easily the most demanding moveset in the entire game. Their first phase isn't too overwhelming, but once they gain that AoE buff, you basically have to be perfect. If you get staggered at the beginning of a combo, then that's it, you're just done. But despite all that going against them, personally, there's just no way I could have put them lower than number 2. Sure, their second phase is super demanding, but it's also damn fun. All throughout, these guys have such a quick and visceral moveset, and dodging them to get hits in is an absolute joy. While their AoEs are debatably a bit too much, I love the fact that they force you to think about where you're dodging, and not just mindlessly iframe. I think these guys really are the most fun you can have with the game's combat outside of boss fights. Plus, for the 100th time in this video, I gotta mention how cool they are.
Deploy aim on sight on my grid. Enemy using shock charge.
Number 1, Old Hunters. Before I began ranking the enemies, and before I even knew I would be making this video, I already knew without a shadow of a doubt that the Old Hunters are my favorite enemies in Bloodborne. Imagine if you took the idea of Hunter NPCs, tweaked them to be a bit less spammy, and gave their moveset a more deliberate and fair pace, while also just making them 10 times cooler. These enemies are such a fantastic, memorable, and downright brilliant introduction to the DLC. Since the Hunter's Nightmares, where blood-drunk hunters are forced to spend their lives just endlessly killing beasts, you'd think it could make them depressed, but nah, they downright revel in this shit. Watching them kill beasts is so entertaining, and there's quite a few variants of them. I love that they're also basically an advertisement for the new weapons in the DLC, like, damn, that's cool. I want to try it now. But of course, this would all be a waste if they weren't actually fun to fight. Luckily though, going toe-to-toe with these guys is an absolute pleasure. They're just fast and punishing enough to make you take them seriously, but they're also not too spammy to where it gets annoying. Personally, my favorites are definitely the ones with boom hammers. They're just the most chaotic and memorable to me. The ones with beast cutters aren't too far behind though. They're some of the most fun enemies to parry in the game. If I were to have one complaint, it would be that some of the ones with beast hunter safes don't have a whole lot of health, but overall that's a pretty minor flaw. And like I said before, I think the Nightmare Executioners have the actual highest highs in terms of combat, but these guys are just a lot more clean, and they have all the other things I mentioned going for them. So, unsurprisingly, I believe the old hunters are the crowning achievement of Bloodborne's enemies. Alright, another enemy ranking done. Honestly, I was pretty shocked that you guys enjoyed the Sekiro one.
Backup's not coming. You want to get out of this alive? Better step up.
Digga! Laufst du die ganze Zeit in die Stats rein? Was soll ich das machen?
There's one.
Digga. Ja, komm, mach direkt bei ihm.
Guess I chose the wrong people for the job. My
This is
bad.
Weaver. We need immediate extract. Mission's a train wreck.
Ja, bin ich nicht Max-Level? Was? Da stand doch gerade, dass ich durch bin. Komm, wir machen noch eine für Prestige 1 werden. Kannst du das nicht später machen? Mir fehlt nur noch ein halbes Level.
This is every Resident Evil game ranked on the spooky level. Alright, so I'm going to be using this template made by Kim Arts, but I adjusted it for my needs, so we have 5
Soll ich Mortal Kombat 1
slots. We have
kaufen oder nicht?
survival
Für
horror,
nächsten Monat?
horror, spooky, action horror, better than Resident Evil 6. Those are like these slots, and we're just going to go through from release all the way, Resident Evil 1 all the way through. I'll skip the spin-offs for now, except maybe Revelations. Maybe I'll talk about Revelations in detail, because I don't have a lot to say about the spin-offs, so I'll just go through in release order from Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 4, then like do the spin-offs at the end. I don't know yet. But yeah, Resident Evil 1. So Resident Evil 1 as a game doesn't really hold up in the horror factor now. Like, this game is very difficult to take seriously. It's kind of like a game where you had to be there when it came out to like fully appreciate it, right? Which I wasn't. Which I do like the game very much, but like it's very hard to take seriously. It's not scary even slightly, but like Especially like Resident
We're
Evil
pulling
2,
ahead.
it's not scary. Honestly, despite
I'll say this once.
but I
Do
don't
not
think
fuck with me.
Resident Evil, like the original, really works playing. Unless you're like a die-hard fan. So one remake did everything so much better. So one remake, what they learned from Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil strategy was out by then as well. And made probably the greatest survival horror game of all time with Resident Evil 1 remake. But Resident Evil, the original here is, I'm gonna be looking at it from where it came out, right? Not when it came out. I should probably say that before. Sorry, I'm just not for it, okay? But like, that's how you got it. There's gonna be a lot of wrestling, there's gonna be a lot of bullshit, but like, stay with me, okay? We'll
Was that your best shot?
beat this together. Right, Resident Evil 1 remake, when it came out, this was the shit, okay? This game was one of the scariest games.
Incoming subject.
Game ever made at the time. Because a lot of the like super scary games hadn't come out yet. Resident Evil was really the starting point for modern survival horror, like horror games in general. Like this
Eyes
game
on
is
enemy.
what coined survival horror and made like what staples like in-store management, puzzle box, level design, destructible enemies, all of that. All of these staples for the entire series, even like the lesser horror ones that Resident Evil 6 still have the DNA of this game. You can feel the original Resident Evil in everything. Like even something
Junge, was?
out, it still feels like Resident Evil 1. Every like horror game from the past like 25 years or 30, how old was it? 30 years, right? From the past 30 years, you can feel Resident Evil in it. This game is very important, and at the time, it was legit scary, and I respect this game a lot, even though I wasn't around to play it when it first came out, and I don't have the full appreciation for what it is. I can still look at it and appreciate what it was, and what it did for survival horror, and how scary it was when it first came out. So I'm going to put this in the good old horror, because I do think that there are games scarier than Resident Evil 1 in the series now. Even like Resident Evil 1 when it first came out, I do think it's still scarier games currently. What is scary Resident Evil games at this point? And Resident Evil 2 is like the perfect video game sequel. This is another game I respect a lot because they did something that not a lot of game companies or developers, but even like any creative team would do, where they looked at their project, they weren't happy with it and how it was turning out, so they pretty much scrapped 90% of like the ideas and the game and it just started again, which I respect a crazy amount. Obviously, that's kind of impossible to do nowadays because of how expensive games are, right? But even back then, that was like crazy. Beating the entire game because they weren't happy with it. I respect that a ton. This game was a massive improvement. The graphics are insanely good for the time. I mean, FMVs and the graphics look so freaking good. Even nowadays, they played it with something and it still holds up today. Like at first you kind of feel like, wow, that's so fucking crazy, but looking at it, it was so it still looks and feels really good. And you can't really say that about a lot of late 90s games, really. Late 90s are when games started getting really good, like Final Fantasy 7, Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, all that. But yeah, this game holds up very well. I feel like a random better one. And to be a factor, I find this game really scary compared to Resident Evil 1. In this game, everything is like perfectly balanced. Like the length is really good. 4 hours long for one playthrough, 8 hours long for both Beyond and Claire. It's a good amount of time so nothing ever like gets stale and nothing ever really stops getting scary throughout the game. Like you start off running with zombies and then you think the window.
Incoming flashbang. This one eye. What's your
Right when you're like getting somewhat comfortable, not comfortable, the zombies, you barely fight them, but you're like, oh yeah, I can walk past the zombies, it's fine, this ain't too bad. Right as you realize that, you meet the liquor, and the liquor fucks you up, and then right as you get comfortable with the lickers and the zombies together, you meet the dogs, and it's like, the game is constantly ramping up with enemies, and the action elements are a lot bigger in this game, but that's not really a detriment to the horror. Like this game has more action moments and it goes further into the storytelling, but that doesn't really put down the horror elements at all. Another thing I like about this game is it lets you feel powerful. It's not scared to like let you kick some ass from time to time. Like it's definitely a little bit more action focused than the original, but that doesn't really make the game less scary to me. It's kind of a reward because you get through the scary part and then you get a gun upgrade and then you're able to kick ass for a little bit, and then something else is introduced or like something else stressful happens and then it gets back into scary. I really like that. In Resident Evil 1, you're pretty much on the back end the whole time, like boss fights, enemies, all that. You're pretty much at a massive disadvantage the whole time, and that's where the horror comes from. While Resident Evil 2's horror comes from making you feel weak and then making you feel powerful and then pushing you back to making you feel weak again. And it's like that balance, and I prefer that a lot. And I actually think that's kind of scarier, going in super confident and then like you get obliterated by something, or William Birkin comes out of nowhere and you like get pushed into a boss. That's another thing this game does very well. This is very rambly, I'm sorry, but that's another thing this game does very well. Throws you into encounters when you're not ready for them. Right, in Resident Evil 1, you can kind of tell when a boss fight's gonna happen. It's like a lot of build up, you know. There's usually a door where you only have one key for that one door. There's usually build up, like you see, what's his name? He's like, Jill, there's a big ass snake. It bit me. And Jill's like, oh no, I gotta go kill that snake. But in this game, there's a little less build up to the boss fights. They just kind of appear, like you're walking down with the chess pieces and then this blob of death is just standing there and you have to take him out. Or like you're going down the train thing with Ada and William Birkin just pops down and you just have to deal with that. And you might not have enough ammo and you might not have enough healing, and that's just stressful having to take him out. But yeah, personally, I can see why people would find it less scary because of like the action, but I find Resident Evil 2 a lot more scary than Resident Evil 1. So yeah, I'm gonna put it on the same slot as Resident Evil 1. I'm gonna put it above Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 3. So Resident Evil 3 is the final game of the trilogy, original Raccoon City trilogy, if you will, where Jill Valentine from the first game returns. But instead of it taking place in one central location like Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2, it takes place in the entirety of Raccoon City, basically. So you get to explore this massive city, you know, multiple districts, multiple RPG-style buildings, like the clock tower, the RPG itself. But the city itself is like a RPG you have to unlock. They make up for the massive map by making the zombies double the speed, and they can attack from further, I think. And there's like massive hordes of them. And also there's the whole backdrop of the destroyed city that is also pretty scary. Like at the start of the game, there's a part where you can like hear a woman scream, and you walk around the corner and there's zombies eating her alive, and that's like proper freaky stuff. Just watching the city get destroyed by hordes and hordes of the undead is horrifying. And then you get to like the bar. You see Brad from the first game, you know, the guy in the helicopter that abandons you. No, don't go. You know, that guy. He's like, Jill, this is freaky ass guy coming. You can't beat him, sorry, bro. And Jill's like, okay, sure. So yeah, he like builds up this whole scary guy, and then you get to the RPG, and this fucking dude, the Nemesis, just murders Brad, kind of like unceremoniously. He's just standing there like, ah! And the Nemesis grabs him and just murders him right there. And it's just this big guy, and you get the option to fight him. And my dumbass, I was like, I needed the first two games, I got this shit. My dumbass, you gave me the choice to fight him or just fight him. I was like, I can fight him, and he is quick. The Nemesis is like super smart. He'll actually dodge you. He'll actually like, I didn't mention it before, so I forgot, but Resident Evil 2 there's an Easter egg, so you already know that, but like, it's not that scary. Easter eggs go behind the not the remake, but the original version is very behind. Just kind of stands there, walks towards you, all scared, and then you go faster. But Nemesis is that idea cranked up to like a million. Nemesis is horrifying all the time. Yeah, he's not just stuck with the boss fights, like another game. He is actually pretty much for 70% of the game, basically. He is just in the world, looking for this music that plays when he's in the area, and like you never know if he'll be there when you walk through a door, and he can walk through doors too. So you'll go into an area, you'll think you're safe from him, and then out of nowhere you'll just hear a door unlock, and he'll just charge you, and it's horrifying. And you can also use weapons like rocket launchers and stuff. Nemesis is freaky. He cranks the scariness from like already pretty scary Resident Evil 2 to freaking horrifying with Resident Evil 3.
Was? Ach so, nur Ladebildschirm. Ich dachte, wir kriegen eine Zombies-Map, weil ich jetzt Prestige 1 gehe. Ja, aber warum, wie mach ich das denn jetzt? Also wirklich, jedes Call of Duty kommen die mit einer neuen, komplizierten Art und Weise. Guck, jetzt bin ich wieder Level 1. Guck, jetzt habe ich keine Waffen mehr. Was? Ich habe meine Waffen immer noch. Ah nein, ich habe nur die C9 und die XM4 und die Marine. Eigentlich müsste ich einen Punkt haben, damit ich dann eine Waffe freikaufen kann. Ja, dann würde ich die kompakt hier freikaufen. Ja, guck, jetzt habe ich die. Oder wie viele habe ich? Ich habe nur einen, ne? Ja, dann kaufe ich mir die hier frei. Die PP ist. Wie weit ist die PP? Ja, okay, darf ich nicht gucken, anscheinend. Aber ich will mal ganz kurz gucken, was die anderen Prestige sind. So, stimmt, jetzt habe ich ja einen neuen Skin. Und das hier, Permanent Unlock. Was ist das? Can be used to permanently. Ah ja, das ist ja quasi, man darf eine Sache freispielen. Mhm. Ja, okay, das hier habe ich ja schon gesehen. Inspired by Collective Death Cuts in Call of Duty World at War. Guck mal, das ist doch Gänsehaut, oder nicht? So Prestige 3. Mindbending Story of Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Black Ops hier. Der Skin hier ist cool. 5. Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Und man kriegt einfach Menendez. Code Steel. Prestige 6. Digga, einfach den Busfahrer. Bester Mann. Was weißt du vom Busfahrer? So, Black Ops 3. Auch Black Ops 3. Was ist denn das für eine Waffe? Die VMP? Es gibt die fucking VMP in WO6, das ist crazy. Jetzt ist es offiziell kein Black Ops, seit Black Ops 3 ohne die VMP. Hoffen wir mal, dass sie nicht allzu overpowered ist, wie sie sonst immer ist. Auf jeden Fall nach den 10 Prestige wird man Prestige Master. Dann geht's hier nur noch ab. Ja, guck, Level 100, 200. Aber für wen habe ich denn jetzt Skin bekommen? Für ihn hier? Tatsächlich. Nacht Raider. Schade, hätte ich den mal für den anderen bekommen. Für den hier. Naja.